Henry Ford was born July 30th, 1863 in Springwells Township, Michigan, to William Ford, an Irish immigrant, and Mary Lidigot Ford, the daughter of Belgian immigrants. He grew up on a farm with 5 siblings, finished 8th grade, and never attended high school. At age 12, he received a pocket watch, sparking his interest in mechanics. And by 15, he was known as a watch repairman. After his mother died in 1876, Ford left farm life, which he disliked. At 1879, Ford became an apprentice machinist in Detroit, later returning home to work with steam engines and servicing them for Westinghouse. In the 1880s to 1890s, he experimented with engines, rejecting steam and electric power in favor of gasoline. In 1892, he completed his first gasoline-powered motor car, capable of 10 to 20 miles per hour, and drove it extensively. By 1896, he had built 3 cars in his home workshop, laying the foundation for his future automotive career. Ford married Clara Jane Bryant on April 11, 1888, and supported himself by farming and running a sawmill. They had one child, Edsel Ford, born on November 6, 1893. In 1891, Henry Ford became an engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company and was promoted to chief engineer in 1893, giving him time and resources to experiment with gasoline engines. In 1896, he built and test drove his first automobile, the Ford quadricycle, and received encouragement from Thomas Edison, who supported his work. Ford built a second car in 1898, and in 1899 founded the Detroit Automobile Company, which failed due to high costs and poor quality. After racing success with a 26-horsepower car in 1901, he helped form the Henry Ford Company, but left in 1902 when Henry M. Leland joined. The company later became Cadillac. Ford then built the powerful 999 race car and, with Alexander Y. Malcolmson, formed Ford and Malcolmson to produce affordable cars, though early sales problems led to financial strain with suppliers like the Dodge brothers. Malcolmson brought in new investors and persuaded the Dodge brothers to accept shares. Ford and Malcolmson was reincorporated as the Ford Motor Company on June 16, 1903, with $28,000 capital. Original investors included Henry Ford, Alexander Malcolmson, the Dodge brothers, John S. Gray, James Couzens, John W. Anderson, and Horace Rackham. Because of Ford's volatility, Gray became president. Ford then set a land speed record on Lake St. Clair, driving 1 mile in 39.4 seconds, 91.3 miles per hour. Race driver Barney Oldfield toured the country with the car, named 999, boosting national recognition of the Ford brand. Ford was also an early backer of the Indianapolis 500. In 1909, Ford applied for a patent on his new transmission mechanism. It was awarded a patent in 1911. The Model T debuted on October 1, 1908, with the steering wheel on the left, enclosed engine and transmission, 4 cylinders cast in a single block, and simple semi-elliptic spring suspension. Ford used extensive publicity, dealer networks, and local motor clubs to promote the car, especially to farmers. Sales soared. With 250,000 sold in 1914 and 472,000 by 1916 as prices dropped. By 1918, half of all U.S. cars were Model Ts, initially available in various colors. All new cars became black due to assembly line efficiency. Production continued until 1927, totaling 15,007,034 units, a record that stood 45 years. By the mid-1920s, GM rose as a competitor with a price ladder strategy and advanced styling under Harley Earl, challenging Ford's low-end focus. Declining Model T sales forced Ford to develop the Model A, launched in 1927 from the new River Rouge assembly plant. By 1926, declining Model T sales pushed Ford to develop a new car. Henry focused on engine, chassis, and mechanical design, leaving body design to his son Edsel, while a skilled engineering team handled most of the work. Edsel also persuaded his father to include a sliding shift transmission. The result was the Model A, introduced in December 1927 and produced until 1931, with over 4 million made. Ford then adopted annual model changes like competitors, and eventually embraced car financing through the Ford-owned Universal Credit Corporation. Henry resisted innovations such as hydraulic brakes and all-metal roofs until 1935 to 1936. In 1932, Ford introduced the flathead V8, the first low-cost 8-cylinder engine, boosting Ford's reputation for performance. At Edsel's urging, Ford launched Mercury in 1939 as a mid-range brand, though Henry showed little enthusiasm. In 1926, Ford introduced a 5-day, 40-hour workweek for factory workers. Office workers followed later, reducing hours from the previous 48-hour week. He aimed to boost productivity by giving workers more leisure, which also encouraged them to buy and enjoy more goods. Ford framed the change as both a business strategy and a social benefit, arguing that leisure should not be seen as lost time or a class privilege. Henry Ford was strongly opposed to labor unions, arguing in My Life and Work that union leaders often caused more harm than good and sought to limit productivity, which he saw as essential for economic growth. He believed that productivity gains, even if they eliminated some jobs, would stimulate the broader economy and create new employment. Ford also thought union leaders had incentives to perpetuate socioeconomic crises. While good managers would naturally act in workers' interests to maximize profits, to prevent unionization, Ford promoted Harry Bennett to head his service department, which used intimidation and violence against organizers. Notable incidents included the 1932 Ford Hunger March, resulting in deaths and injuries, and the 1937 Battle of the Overpass, when Bennett's men attacked UAW representatives. Despite pressure from his son Edsel and growing unrest, Ford resisted union negotiations for years, keeping Bennett in charge to block agreements. The Ford Motor Company was the last Detroit automaker to recognize the UAW. A 1941 sit-down strike at the River Rouge plant nearly led Ford to consider breaking up the company, but his wife Clara persuaded him to negotiate instead. The resulting UAW contract was favorable, and Ford later acknowledged that union recognition had ultimately strengthened his position against competitors like General Motors. During World War I, Ford built Liberty aircraft engines and later returned to cars until acquiring the Stout Metal Airplane Company in 1925. His most successful plane was the Ford 4AT trimotor, or Tin Goose, made of corrugated metal with a corrosion-resistant alclad alloy. First flown in 1926, it was the USS first successful passenger airliner, carrying about 12 passengers and also served the U.S. Army, a total of 199. Trimotors were built before the division closed in 1933 due to poor sales during the Great Depression. Ford was posthumously inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 1985 for his contributions to aviation. Ford opposed war, viewing it as wasteful, and supported pacifist causes. In 1915, he funded a peace ship to Europe with 170 activists, though it drew ridicule and gained little support. He blamed financiers, particularly German Jewish bankers, for instigating World War I. Ford argued that efficient, productive business discouraged war, as most companies preferred steady profits over conflict. During the war, his factories produced tractors, trucks, and warplane engines, including the Liberty engine. In 1918, President Wilson encouraged him to run for the U.S. Senate to support the League of Nations. Ford ran, but narrowly lost. He remained a strong supporter of Wilson and the League, helping fund Wilson's 1919 speaking tour. Ford opposed U.S. entry into World War II. Leaving wars were driven by greedy financiers, whom he coded as Jusand, that international business could prevent conflict. He distrusted Roosevelt, limited trade with belligerents, and continued doing business with Nazi Germany, while also building engines for Britain. Ford was an early America First Committee member, but resigned amid controversy. His German subsidiary used French POW labor in violation of the Geneva Convention. After the U.S. entered the war in December 1941, Ford fully supported the American war effort. After Edsel Ford's death in 1943, Henry nominally resumed control, but strokes and declining mental health left him sidelined. Senior executives, led by Charles Sorensen and Harry Bennett, effectively ran the company. Ford grew jealous of Sorensen's publicity and forced him out in 1944. His incompetence sparked discussions in Washington about restoring the company, potentially through government intervention or an executive-led coup. In 1945, facing bankruptcy, Ford was pressured by his wife Clara and Edsel's widow Eleanor to relinquish control of the company to his grandson, Henry Ford II, who immediately fired Harry Bennett. Ford pursued economic independence for the U.S., building the River Rouge plant to produce cars entirely in-house. He expanded globally, opening assembly plants in Britain, Canada, Italy, Germany, Australia, France, India, and Mexico, and had dealerships on 6 continents by 1929. He believed international trade promoted peace and used the Model T and assembly line to demonstrate this. Ford was involved in auto racing from 1901 to 1913, initially as a driver and constructor before hiring drivers. In 1901, he defeated Alexander Whitten in the race car sweepstakes, leading to the founding of the Henry Ford Company. He raced stripped-down Model Ts, finishing first, later disqualified in a 1909 cross-country race and setting a 1-mile speed record in 1911 with driver Frank Kulick. In 1913, Ford withdrew from the Indianapolis 500 due to rule changes requiring extra weight, and soon left racing permanently, criticizing its rules, time demands, and lack of meaningful measure for automobiles. In My Life and Work, he described racing dismissively, saying it was necessary only because of public ignorance at the time, but he still ensured his cars were competitive. Ford focused primarily on transportation, efficiency, affordability, reliability, and automation rather than speed. Despite his brief racing career, he left a mark on the sport and was inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 1996. By 1943, Henry Ford's health was declining, with cardiovascular issues and signs of mental inconsistency. After his son Edsel's death, he resumed the presidency of Ford Motor Company, despite his age and the board's reservations. The company struggled financially, losing over $10 million a month, and operations were so troubled that a government takeover was briefly considered. Ford retired in September 1945, handing control to his grandson, Henry Ford II. In 1946, he was honored at the Automotive Golden Jubilee for his impact on the industry. Ford died on April 7, 1947, at 83, and was buried at Ford Cemetery in Detroit. What do you think about Ford's legacy? Is he a revolutionary innovator or a more complex figure? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Be sure to check out our other videos on influential figures in history and discover how they shaped the world.